Good morning. Thank you for being here. I'm joined this morning by a number of policy leaders for the state of Minnesota, including the Commissioner of Corrections, Joan Fabian, to my right. Oh, wait a minute. What's going on with this, Brian?
Hi, operator. We're starting the call. You don't have to give any instructions. Just have them press star 1 at the end for questions. Thanks.
Go ahead.
All right, sorry. So we're joined by Commissioner of Corrections Joan Fabian, Commissioner of the Department of Human Services Cal Ludeman, Superintendent of the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension Tim O'Malley, the Assistant Commissioner of the Department of Public Safety Tim Leslie, and the State Sex Offender Coordinator Harry Kennedy. We're here this morning to announce a proposal that we asked the Minnesota Legislature to pass this session, and that is to double the sentences for sex offenders in the state of Minnesota. Sex offenders in our state and across this country continue to present a very serious challenge to the safety of our fellow citizens and to our communities and to our families. They need to be kept off the street for as long as possible, and Minnesota's current laws in that regard can be even further improved. As you may know, the current presumptive sentence for criminal sexual conduct in the first degree is 12 years. We're proposing to double that to 25 years. You'll remember that in 2005 we went through a number of sentencing reforms for sex offenders, including the first time ever creation of indeterminate sentencing for serious sex offenders. But in order for that indeterminate sentencing to be used, two heinous variables or factors have to be present. It's been a helpful tool, but not used as much as we would like since 2005 in terms of the judges feeling or finding that it's appropriate with enough frequency. So with that track record in mind, today we're proposing that the sex offender sentencing be doubled for all criminal sexual conduct offenses in the first degree, regardless of whether those heinous elements are present or not. This will do a number of things, but importantly, it will continue the course that we're on, which is to get more and more of these individuals locked up for as long as possible. In the last 10 years, we have increased the number of sex offenders in Minnesota's prison systems by over 40%. It's the largest increase, we think, in the state's history. It is the largest increase in the state's history. As you know, the current system involves something called civil commitment, so that when a serious sex offender has served his or her time in prison, they are oftentimes referred to what's called civil commitment once their prison time is done. That program is extraordinarily expensive. It has a daily cost to keep individuals contained or locked up in that regard of $325 per day. The current per diem prison costs are $63 per day. So it is a wise public policy direction for the state to expand these sentences, to keep the individuals in prison longer. It not only will help advance the cause of public safety, but it will also be a more economical approach relative to the offset that's available for civil commitment. Now, overall, the proposal will cost some more money, but because these individuals are locked up for the first 8 or 12 years of their sentence anyhow, in the near term, it doesn't cost much, and because of the offset that I just described, over 25 years, the overall cost to the state is nominal. It's a few, well, we don't have the exact numbers, but it's in the neighborhood of a few $1 million or maybe $5 million. But we have other proposals that we're emphasizing today as well, and the second relates to the bonding bill. We have a legislature that is working on a bonding bill that does not include our proposal to significantly increase the capacity of the sex offender facility at Moose Lake to keep sex offenders contained in that facility to meet growing and future demands for that program. That facility is needed, while at the same time they have money in their bills to fund things like recreation centers, arts facilities, pottery and artistic facilities of a local nature, and much more. So we believe those bills are misprioritized for a variety of reasons, but that's one of the key ones. I want to ask Tim O'Malley, the head of the BCA, to come forward and describe another announcement that we're proposing today. It's called NetSmart. This will be a proposal that will be educational and formative for schools across Minnesota to become more aware of the dangers of internet solicitations as it relates to sexually predatory advances onto our children and others in the population. And we think this will be a helpful initiative to raise awareness and decrease the likelihood of that happening in the future as well. Tim.
Thank you, Governor. NetSmarts is a program that will be rolled out in the next couple of weeks. It is every single day in the criminal justice community, the men and women who work there, whether it's in law enforcement and prosecution and defense in the courts, see cases that would make you sick, would cause you to be physically ill if you knew the details of those kinds of cases. A problem like that doesn't come about because of a single issue. It comes about because of a number of factors, and this NetSmarts program is one more step to try and address the issue in a broader, more comprehensive way. It is the problems that law enforcement face and that we all face in this arena cannot be solved by law enforcement alone. There's a need first to raise awareness across the board. That has been done, and now the next step is to give parents, teachers, coaches, anybody else who has an influence on children, the tools they need to keep them safe. That's exactly what NetSmarts does. There are more filtering and firewalls and blocking and monitoring system that's ever been available, yet we still see online solicitation of juveniles, of young children, on the increase. Technology is a tool we can use, but it's also a tool that the criminals are using. They know how to prey on children, they know how to play this, and they know how to make arrangements to create false identifications for themselves, so the children are most vulnerable, are really very vulnerable when they're online. Some quick statistics just to put it in perspective. 1 out of 7 children, this is from a study about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, 1 out of 7 children are sexually solicited online, just on average across the country. 1 out of 3 children say that they have seen sexually explicit material on the internet that they did not want to see. Okay? The internet itself, I mean, we've all seen it. 1 in 3 kindergartners, 1 in 3 kindergartners are on the internet. Okay? 1 in 5 children before they even get to nursery school are on the internet. And when you start thinking that they're getting this information coming at them without any effort on their part, unsolicited, they're seeing these things. And when you look at the other side of it, those who are providing this material to the kids and those who are soliciting them know how to do this. They know how to play on their vulnerabilities. We had a case very recently. A 13-year-old girl was on MySpace, had her profile up there, ended up being solicited by a 19-year-old man online. They ended up meeting in a motel room. There's liquor, there's sex, there's problems, right? She, somewhat innocently at first, is on MySpace. You would think a kid could be safe there. They're not as safe as we want them to be there. We've had cases, and this isn't just in the metro area. In Kittson County, there was a case not long ago in which a 14-year-old girl was solicited by a 34-year-old man. They ended up at a motel room in East Grand Forks. Shakopee pilot that you read about flew to Texas to meet with a 12-year-old boy. He's a 28-year-old man. They met on MySpace. A Yahoo chat room, a 14-year-old girl was solicited by a 36-year-old man in Lakeville. This is pervasive, and it's as I said, it's a situation that is so harmful to every segment, every child in the state, that one solution isn't going to do it. So instead, we have this program now that will provide age-appropriate education to children throughout the state. Every single school in Minnesota in the next 2 weeks, every single school will get this training program. We have some kits to look at afterwards. It has the program on a DVD. It also has the lesson plan. It has everything. This is the result of a partnership between the governor's office, the Department of Public Safety, the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, the Department of Education. They did a survey in the last year asking their teachers what do they need. One of the things they asked for is, we understand the dangers. We need the tools. Can you get us something that is usable and will help the kids understand these dangers at an age-appropriate level? The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, NCMEC, it's a nonprofit out of D.C. They created this. It's been extraordinarily successful. And I think, and so does the Governor's Office, DPS, Department of Education, everybody thinks that this will help tremendously in educating our kids, but not just the kids, also the parents, the teachers, the coaches, and the others that will have the influence to keep our kids safe when they're most vulnerable, using a tool that everybody's going to continue to use, the internet. I think that's all I have for now. Okay.
Anybody else want anything? Good. Great. Again, sex offenders continue to be a scourge to public safety across this country and in Minnesota. In many cases, they are individuals who we have a very difficult time trying to remediate or change behaviors. They are individuals who, in my view, need to be taken off the streets and locked up for as long as possible. Again, we've made great strides in Minnesota over the last number of years, over the last decade, in improving the laws in this regard, but they need to continue to be improved. The proposal today to double the sentences for sex offenders in our state will do that. It will also begin to reshape the relative emphasis on civil commitment versus keeping individuals like this in prison longer. And, of course, the cost implications of that of $325 a day in civil commitment versus $63 a day in prison are noteworthy as well. I'll take your questions on this proposal, and then if you have questions on other things, I'll stick around and do that as well after our other guests leave. Yeah.
Will your proposal require the Moose Lake expansion? Two-part question. Will your proposal allow the Moose Lake expansion less soon? Is it necessary not quite as soon? And secondly, is there any way that you will sign the bonding bill without the Moose Lake provision in it?
Well, you'll get a letter, if you haven't already, Bill, this morning from me to the legislature about their bonding bill outlining our concerns, and first of all relating to the overall size of their bill and also highlighting what we believe are some misplaced priorities, some of which I mentioned earlier today. They don't fund, for example, a facility to keep dangerous sex offenders locked up longer or contained longer. They don't fund a much-needed Homeland Security emergency management facility that is a high priority in terms of the first order of business for government. And yet they have money to fund a art or pottery facility in Chatfield. They have money to do civic centers all over the state. They have money to do an Arrowwood or Arrowhead recreation center. And so, again, their priorities are not properly focused. The bill's too large. We put that all in a letter form and are inviting them to come to a meeting to get that hashed out after they get their bills passed over the House and Senate. But if they bring those bills to my desk in the form that they're in or anything close to the form that they're in, they're going to get vetoed in their entirety.
Then would Moose Lake perhaps not be necessary?
No, we'll still need it. The way this works, again, there's many aspects to the sex offender sentencing laws in Minnesota, but, again, for the most heinous crimes with the heinous elements present, we adopted in 2005 indeterminate sentencing, so the individuals can be kept potentially for life in prison if certain circumstances are met. But then there's another group, the group we're talking about today, which don't meet that criteria, who will have presumptive sentences go from 12 years to 25 years. But all of this is not going to dramatically affect the civil commitment trajectory that we have currently. It'll help. It'll diminish it somewhat, but we're still going to need that facility. Lori, we're told, I think, and I'll let Joan answer this, that if we do this, we would be, going from more like average to on the more aggressive end of things, although not the most aggressive. Is that a fair summary? Or our sex offender coordinator, nice job title, by the way, but can answer that.
Excuse me. The enhancement to 25 years would be a strong move for Minnesota and place us on the higher end of sentencing for criminal sexual conduct.
Quantify, Harry, the top 10, top 20.
I couldn't give an exact percentage right now. It'd be a significant increase that would put us in line with some of the tougher sentencing enhancements that were enacted in other states.
How many offenders would this include down the line? Does it mean more prison beds are needed? I'm not talking about 5 or 10 years, but after, when you start sentencing people up to 25 years.
I can address the
Well, Pat, again, these are all relative numbers, so relative to what would have been the case under current law. If you go out 25 years, which is the length of the presumptive sentence, the projected impact 25 years out, approximately 500 people. But then you have to offset that against the people who would have otherwise gone into civil commitment under the current system but are now going to be in prison longer. But the total bed impact on the correction side is about 500.
So does that mean that we'll need 500 more beds, just to be clear?
Well, you will have a bed impact of 500, whether that can be accommodated or not on current capacity. Keep in mind we've brought online a lot of prison space in recent years, and previous bonding bills under my administration have done that to the point where we don't even use Appleton anymore. That is now empty or will soon be of Minnesota prisoners. So we have the ability to scale up bed space through Appleton or otherwise if we need it. And again, that's offset by a relative decline in civil commitment.
What would be the that, Governor, between, I don't know, prison beds and civil commitment? Any
Well,
idea?
we don't have, we have some estimates for that, Bill, but just think about, under the current system, somebody gets a presumptive sentence of 12 years, which means they actually serve 8. So, for the first 8 years of this proposal or current law, they're about the same because everybody's in prison. But after year 8, there's a percent of the population of sex offenders who is released because they've served their time, and then there's a percent that go to civil commitment. For that percent who goes to civil commitment, they will now be in prison between years 8 and up to years 25 instead of being in civil commitment. And the daily differential is the difference between $325 per day per person on the civil commitment side in today's dollars versus $63 per day per person if you're in prison. If you do all that on a net, wash it out basis, over 25 years, the net cost of this we think is, not more than a few to $5 million.
What's going to be the cost of this training program over the next 2 weeks, is that correct?
I'm sorry?
These internet
Oh, the
training
Nets program? Tim?
Yeah. Did you say 2 weeks, correct?
The kits will go out to all the schools within the next 2 weeks. The training program is costing the state of Minnesota $0. It's all done with the Department of Justice grant. So all the kits have been provided. We're going to get them into the schools, and then it's up to the teachers and the administrations within the school districts how they want to use them or even if they want to use them. But again, their survey from the Department of Education said, please get us this information.
So this grant money was available, why wasn't this done earlier?
I'm sorry, you say it again?
This grant money was available on the federal level, why wasn't this done earlier?
We just got the grant money. We just got it within the last year, and then we get all the, we had to get them together and work with NetSmarts and the other partners, Department of Education, and figure out how to roll them all out. But we're trying to get them out there as quick as we can to the kids.
Yeah, a couple of things, Martika. And by the way, while I'm thinking of it, clarify. Brian reminds me that the Chatfield, previously Sheet Music Museum, now re-envisioned as a broad museum, has only one component of it, the Potter's Center. That's not the only part of it. What? It's not Potter? It's Potter's Center.
The name of it would be that, but it's the Sheet Music Museum re-envisioned as a performance center.
Okay, well, it's just an example of whether that's a proper priority versus, but I didn't want you to think it was only pottery. As to your question, Martika, a couple of things. One is we've had now a few years of experience with the 2005 changes, and while they've been helpful, they're not used as much as we would like. So we want to have the scenario be that the presumptive sentence, the likely sentence under the sentence guidelines under the law would be what we've proposed today, which is doubling. And so it's that track record that brings us to today's proposal.
Governor, does this mean for people that they will have fewer notices too, because that always becomes the big, of the, level 3 most likely to reoffend, those people won't be coming out as early, so the community won't be having as many of those meetings with those.
Yeah, well, certainly between year 12 and 25, that will be true.
But in general, can they expect fewer of those most likely to reoffend?
Yes, again, under the proposal or current law, for the first 8 years, the same people who are going to be in prison. So, the changes that you'll notice either on bed impacts or what you're asking will begin in year 9. Again, current sentencing law is 12-year presumptive sentence for this kind of behavior. You serve 8 under the way the law works in Minnesota. Under this proposal, it's going to be doubled to 25. You'll end up serving, 17 or what is it, 17? 16.6, rounded to 17. You'll serve 17. So you won't notice the relative change here until year 9, Mary, relative to your question. But in those intervening years after, year 8, you'll see less notices because people won't be going to civil commitment. They'll be staying in prison.
Has somebody talked about the number of prisoners, charged with sex offenses now versus pre-Shadeen, and also the civil commitment?
Yeah, I think Joan is probably best suited to answer that.
Currently, we've got 1,646 sex offenders in prison. I don't think there's, after Drew Shadeen, the biggest change was the fact that there's many more civil commitments. So we've increased steadily in sex offenders, but I don't think, it's 41% that we've increased in the last 10 years. So that was before Drew Shadeen as well. The civil commitment referrals, I think you know that the governor had us look at our entire system after the tragedy with Drew Shadeen. And one of the things that we really changed significantly was how we do our screenings and assessment. And right now, this year, we screened like 800, or in 2009, we screened about 850 offenders who were getting ready to get out in a year. And of those, we referred 114. They met what we thought the statute, in our opinion, they met the statutory criteria. So we sent those to the county attorney. And again, the county attorney is the only one who can make the decision about whether they're going to take it forward before the court. So the court then decides. So since Drew Shadeen and the big increase, all of these people that have been referred have met the statutory criteria. So I think, you know, that is one of the major things. The other thing is we're supervising them a lot more stringently. The governor added 18 intensive supervised release agents just for sex offenders. So we have the level 2 and level 3 offenders. When they get out, they're on this intensive program where they're met face-to-face 3 times a week. We have unannounced drop-ins, weekends, nights, so that certainly has made a difference in how they're supervised.
Regarding the Moose Lake treatment facilities, do you think that sex offenders can really be treated? And if you don't, should we change the statutory requirements to put them through the prison system instead for longer periods of time?
Well, that is ultimately a legal and psychological question. You know, I have a view of that, but it's just my personal view, Pat. My personal view is that it is very difficult to successfully treat them, and I've elaborated on that in the past, but again, that ultimately has legal and psychiatric and psychological implications for our current system, and I would defer to the Commissioner and others to answer that in more detail.
Should they be punished instead of treated?
Well, they do get punished because they go to prison. We want them to stay in prison longer.
I'm sure I'm not asking this question correctly. Should they, if you're expanding and extending, toughening the sentences for sex offenders, should we have more people going through that than spending $400?
Well, that's really not the point. The point is we have a current law that says if you can engage in very serious criminal sexual conduct of the first degree, including penetration with a minor, the presumptive sentence is 12 years and you get out in 8. That's not enough, and that's not the national standard, and we need to be leading, being aggressive on that, not lagging.
Let's take some questions on the phone.
Operator, are there questions on the phone from our phone callers relating to this topic, and we'll switch to other topics in a minute.
We do have a question from Shannon Feasy with Shakopee Valley News. Your line is open, Shannon.
Hey, Governor. Here in Scott County, we've been told that we're going to be getting one of a handful of people might be released from sex offender treatment facilities for civilly committed offenders. And our county administrator fears that part of the reason that he thinks that they're going to do more of this in the future is the lack of room at the facility, which he even says is going to be full by 2012. And then also political pressures regarding the constitutional question of, you know, having someone basically in treatment for the rest of their life when they've served their prison sentence, being that no one's been released yet from this facility. So I was wondering, how is the state, even if this is passed, this proposal, how is the state going to address just the lack of room and also the constitutionality of having these people locked up if they don't start releasing people from the current treatment facility?
Yeah, well, I think people mix, of course, the descriptions of the various programs, sometimes unknowingly, or you got to be careful whether you're talking about the civil commitment program or the prison system. They're two different things, of course. But as to the civil commitment program, nobody's been let out yet. Right, Commissioner? Isn't that right? Nobody's been let out yet. So the person that is coming into your community is not likely coming from the civil commitment program because that isn't happening at the moment. So they're somebody who has served their prison time is coming out of prison in all likelihood and has not been referred to civil commitment. So that's a different question that you're asking. as to the future, there's no doubt that there may be more civil commitments, and that's why we need to expand the facilities, and that's why that proposal in the bonding bill is important. Anyone else on the phone?
Currently, we have no additional questions at this time, sir.
Anything else in the room on this topic? Okay, we'll take a short break, and then we'll come back and answer your other questions. Thanks.
Live here from
Okay, who's got other questions?
Where are you on the bill that was brought in today, doing something to modify your allotment?
Yeah, we sent a letter over to the legislative leaders, Eric, saying that a bill that comes to me that tries to modify, reduce, or limit on allotment authority without my previous agreement is going to get vetoed. So they know that, and we hope that they'll either work something out or stand down from those efforts.
Why would we do this? Why is this not a good idea to limit, modify, or something like that?
Well, it may be, Pat, but for them to do it unilaterally and just throw it at me is not a good way to go about it.
What do you mean, maybe?
Well, they have some concerns about it, and so this is a statute that's been on the books, I think, since the 1930s. It's been relied upon by governors from both parties, including Governor Perpich when the legislature went home and left him with a deficit, and he used the unallotment in that context. And so this is a statute that has served the state well over many decades, actually now generations, and governors from both parties. And so if they think it needs to be improved in some fashion, I'm open to listen to their arguments. But if they set up on a course where they're simply going to fashion some change and not reach agreement with me on that, then it's going to get vetoed.
Governor, what's the difference between you acting unilaterally and the legislature acting unilaterally?
I'm sorry?
What's the difference between you acting unilaterally and the legislature acting unilaterally? I mean, which is what you do on unallotment.
Well, the difference is I have the opportunity to sign or veto bills, and the unallotment is an agreement between the legislature and the governor, pre-existing, where the legislature and the governor previously agreed to this arrangement. So that's a previously agreed upon provision, authority between the legislature and the governor.
So Governor, it sounds like you're not open to making significant changes to this fall.
Well, I don't know what their changes are, Tom. I'm not going to say there can't be any changes ever. There may be willing to look at it, but they need to make clear what their changes are, and we haven't seen those yet. Today? Yes. Yes, that we're correct in our interpretation of the law. I think it's a public filing, and it goes on for 25 or 30 pages, and I would commend it to you as you're reading this afternoon.
It'll come out mid to late this afternoon. The Solicitor General, Alan Gilbert, will file it mid to late afternoon, and then I'll give it to you guys after he files that.
I mean, the short version is that the statute is constitutional, and the way that we used it and interpreted it is legal.
Governor, on supplemental budget, when do you expect to have that to the legislature?
Late this week or very early next week, Pat?
Friday or Monday?
Probably, yeah.
Governor, taking some criticism from the DFL for being out of town 2 of the first 3 days of the session, after you'd said you were going to reduce your out-of-state travel during the session. What's your response to me?
Well, I think I was gone Friday night and Sunday night and Monday morning, so if I was home on Friday night, I probably would have been, with my kids or watching the Wild game, so I'm not sure how that affected the legislative session.
And follow up on an unrelated question. The National Guard, the Red Bulls, are waiting for a lot of bonus pay that's been due to them for 3 years. I know you have sent letters in the past, and have you done anything recently to urge the Defense Secretary to pay that money to those National Guard?
Yes, it's very frustrating, and I've been in touch with our National Guard about it. Both they and our congressional delegation and our office is very upset about the delay in getting those payments. They're owed those payments. They need to get them. They should have received them a long time ago. And now the Secretary of Defense, I think through the questioning of John Klein, is committed to get back to us, but we haven't heard a definitive word yet, Tom.
Where are you on early primary, Governor, the August 10th primary, Governor?
I think having the primary in August, is not ideal, but federal law now requires it to accommodate military voting, so we need to abide by that direction from the federal government. And and we want to accommodate military voting. They've set up some new rules and timetables for the distribution of military ballots. In order to accommodate that, the primary can no longer be in September. So moving to August is a necessity, and it's something that we support.
Governor, on
GAMC bill looks like that's going to be on the Senate floor on Thursday. They say that they've taken the unallotment clause out of it, and that they're hoping that you like it as it is.
Well, we have some serious concerns with it, Bill. As I understand it, it has a number of features, including a situation where they're basically laundering money between, not illegally, but practically laundering money between the state and federal government in ways that are concerning. In other words, under their construct, the state imposes a surcharge or surtax on hospitals. The hospitals then remit the money back to the state. The state gets 50 cents on a dollar from the federal government, and the state, pays back the hospitals in some enhanced reimbursement. I mean, it's a very convoluted, system. And then they're also putting a surtax or surcharge on various other elements of the healthcare industry. And I don't think the thing holds up financially relative to the budget challenges that we face. So it doesn't look like it's going to be a complete solution. Well, I haven't thought about that, Martiga. In terms of the last major speeches, I presume I'll be around between February and the end of the year, but maybe the last major speech anybody listens to. Theme for the state of the state? I'm just kidding about that. No, it won't be my last major speech. I mean, there'll be other events and things, but it's the last state of the state, obviously. And the theme's going to be that we face challenging times, and the state is resilient, and there's some things we need to do to move the state forward that are not just rewinding the tape to the past, that we have to look to the future and position Minnesota to grow jobs and have economic growth in a very changing world, in a very changing market.
Governor, do you remember the last time you had a handshake agreement with DFL leaders? And what does that say about the status moving forward with this session?
Well, we reached agreement last year, Tom, on all of the major bills except the tax bill. So I think there's 10 or 12 bills. I signed them all with the exception of their proposals to raise taxes. So that meeting of the minds occurred last spring.
That wasn't a handshake agreement when you guys came out of the session and said, he got something, I got something.
Well, they proposed some things, and I agreed with them and signed them into law. I would say that's an agreement.
Governor, can you say a little more about the bonding bill? You're not inclined to line item it down to a side you can support?
Well, I've done that in the past, but then, it really just kind of lets them off the hook in terms of their obligations and responsibilities to present a bill that's reasonable, focused, prioritized. And the bills that they have now don't meet that definition. If they were close and it was a matter of cleaning up a few things, I would do that. But if they're that far off the mark, both in terms of size and priorities, I think we'll give them a chance to have a do-over.
Governor, got time for one more question.
Governor, legislative leader said last week at the Chamber of Commerce they would not pursue a Viking Stadium bill unless you take the lead on it and offer a bill yourself. Do you plan to do that?
That won't be in our budget, Tom, that we're unveiling this session. We don't have a proposal for that. The legislators, particularly those who have been here 30 years, 40 years, committee chairs, know all the numbers, know the system, they could actually have a creative thought on their own where they initiate something rather than always waiting just for me. And we're happy to do that, but I would encourage them once in a while to have their own thought, not just relating to the Viking Stadium in general. So
Might you have a proposal, though, at some point, or not?
we don't have a proposal. And the thing I mentioned on NPR the other day, I got asked, as you know, by Gary Eichten, assuming you can't have tax increases, what are some ideas for how you would deal with the Viking Stadium? And I shared those two ideas that I think you're familiar with as examples. But that Mega Millions game is not yet in the forecast. It's something that just started in late January and produces a lot of money. So that would be one example, and I mentioned a couple others.
All right.
Thank you.